So if you're looking to figure out like exactly like what you want to do for like a video series, you have to think about not just what problem you solve, although that's like the main thing, right? But it's not just about what problem you solve, it's about really drilling down on who your customers are and who your potential customers are and what makes them tick, and not just in relationship to your product. So you want to like drill. I have a whole exercise in the book, but it's this exercise that allows you to sort of drill in on like the persona or the avatar, like the very specific person that you're talking to, like what their life is like, how many kids they have, what they do for fun, what their guilty pleasures are, what keeps them up at night, what they hate, what their pain points are, how insecure they are, right? So like it's more than just what problem you solve. I think that like the problem you have, the issue that we see often is that I'll talk to companies like you and like I'll come in and they'll say, okay, so what product do you solve? Or like what product do you have? Okay, great, it's your product. Okay, so what problem do you solve? And maybe they can, so maybe they'll come up with a problem that they solve. But then you're still not there. Because if you're just going with the what problem do we solve complex, you're just going to make a commercial. And that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about like branded editorial content that's meant to look native in social feeds and native on YouTube and all of that type of stuff. So when you're trying to do that type of stuff, you need to think more about the lifestyle and more about the emotional life. I think that's sort of the key idea, right? Like what's the emotional life of your avatar? And what are all of the things that they can emotionally respond to? And so when you key in on that emotional response, you start to get a sense for what sort of content you can create. So let's say, I don't want to use you for example, but let's say that you sell artwork. So you sell like high-end artwork to people, and it costs like thousands of dollars or something like that, right? It's like really expensive artwork, and you're trying to figure out how to run like a branded editorial series for this. You don't want to just run commercials. You want people to emotionally connect, and so they'll buy stuff there because they fall in love with you. That's the whole reason to do this in the first place, right? Okay, so you sell like high-end artwork. And so you start thinking about the avatar. The first thing that you'll do is you'll go through and pin down that avatar. So maybe you figured out that it's an urban, 40 plus, affluent male with 2 kids who doesn't have art, but it's very important to them to, when guests come over or when people go to his office, that he's looked at as an affluent individual, right? You with me so far? Okay. So there's like a certain way that this person needs to look. And they have specific pain points. Like they don't want to look like things are just like thrown together. And they want to be looked at as cultured. It's very important. It's very status, right? Like a lot of it comes down to status. So how are you looked at? Like, are you looked at as someone who's like up the food chain, down the food chain, middle of the food chain? Clearly, if you're going and spending thousands of dollars on original art and hanging it up in your wall, you're very concerned with the way that you're being viewed. Most likely. Like, I don't want to pigeonhole everybody who likes good art and will spend thousands of dollars on it. But let's be honest, like that's largely who we're selling art to, right? Like people who want that status symbol of seeing the art on the wall. So we know, so what do we know about somebody who buys a $5,000 piece of art and puts it up on the wall? They care about how they are viewed. There's probably a little bit of insecurity there, as there is with most of us, but there's a specific type of insecurity. There's a status maintaining thing going on because he's expected to be a certain way when people walk into that office or walk into that home. So based on that, he has to maintain that by having art up there, right? But he's not just going to be a regular businessman. No, he doesn't want to be that. I mean, you can tell when it's a canvas print versus being like an original piece of art. So he wants to look cultured. He wants to look like he's somewhat in touch with art, and sort of like on the level with that. Like, I understand art. Like I get it, right? So that's that, right? So what kind of branded stuff would we make? So I have a process for this in the book. I'll give you a copy. So basically, I do this persona exercise. I come up with this avatar, and then I have this thing I call the lifestyle map. And just basically, I have the avatar in the center, and then I sort of break out all the major lifestyle traits of this person in like a spider web around the avatar, and that helps me understand like what makes this person tick. Like, are they a father? Are they, like a boss? They I don't know, like don't walk to work, like they have a driver. Like, what are like the core things about this person's life? And then you can start to think about like what that person's going to emotionally respond to. So they're going to respond to stories about status, stories about art and culture that bridge that gap between art and culture and business, or art and culture and high affluent status. I mean, we used to have that back in the Renaissance and in earlier times. It was sort of art and culture was hand in hand. Now, art and culture isn't really hand in hand with affluence as much. So there's sort of a disconnect there. So if I was doing a branded content series for this, I would look to sort of bridge that gap. And I would say, okay, so I see the things that matter to this person, and so what's the main goal here? What's the main goal of doing these things? That's what I would ask next. So what's the main goal? So the main goal isn't necessarily to sell art, right? It's not always the main goal of PR. So the main goal is, with PR, mass attention in your niche and mass affinity in your niche. So you want people to love you, and you want to be a household name in your niche. And that is social validation. That's what you really want, is social validation. Oh, this is such a cool idea. So what if, for example, and I'm just like literally spitballing right now, but what if, for example, you had like a subject, and this is going to be your video series. Like each video would have a different subject that was just like the avatar, actually. So you have like this six-figure earner, like high six-figure earner, businessman, and he has this office with like tons of amazing art in it. So he's an aficionado. And of course, we set it up a little bit in the beginning about how important he is and the high status that everybody sees him with. And again, this is not fiction, so this would be like a non-fiction thing, because it needs to feel like this editorial content. That's super important. You could do it with fiction too, and I think it could be powerful, but like way harder to pull off. So let's say he's got a bunch of high-end art, right? Like all these like $10,000, like $20,000, $5,000. And what we're going to do is tell this story about how in each episode, one of these men give away all of this art to somebody who could use that in their lives. And not like as a pity thing, but actually to improve their lives, like a children's hospital or something. And he decides he's going to take a piece of painting off the wall, like one each day, for a week, and he's going to go give it to that children's hospital and see how it makes them feel. Then he brings it, and every time he pins it in there, they have a conversation about it, and he tells them the story about how he came across it and what that art means to them, and then they get to respond to it. And then, like, my book is called Producing Empathy, because like empathy is the reason why anybody engages in any content, why they click anything, why they watch anything. There's so much empathy there. There's so much. And you might say like, oh, but the whole point is to sell art. Why do we want to make a video series about people throwing away art? But that's the beautiful thing about it, is that it's almost saying this person is so important, has such high status, that he can afford to give away $20,000 worth of this art, which he finds important to his life, to others. It's like amazing. And like it also sends that message that like if you believe in art, like if you're a person who believes in art and has art, then you are the kind of person who will give back. Like you're charitable and good, and everybody will want to know you and love you. Isn't that that's an amazing idea, right? So like that's where you go from. Like you start not necessarily with the problem that's solved. You start with the avatar and what they care about in their lives and what their ultimate goals are, and then you can sort of build a story back from that and work out how it happens. I think that'd be super powerful.